welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 192nd episode, our guest is Dan West. Dan West is a veteran with a story to tell. After deployment injuries prematurely ended his time in the Army, Dan began traveling the country with a message of overcoming adversity through humor. Dan is a featured writer for drinkingwithpaul.com and has been seen at Gilda's Laughfest and Indiana Comic-Con. Dan loves kittens, whiskey, and long walks on the beach provided that walk involves either kittens or whiskey. And now on to the show. So thank you for taking the time tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I always like doing stuff like this, and I've been hearing about your podcast for quite a while over the years, so I was excited.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you reached out. It's nice to know that somebody listens when I do something. There's no telling sometimes, it feels like, but that's good. Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, go ahead and I guess introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are.
Well, I am Dan West. I am currently a Kokomo-based comedian, but I've lived a little bit of everywhere, and when the world's not on fire, I'm on the road a lot, but right now it's a lot of virtual shows.
Right. But where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Kokomo, or where are you from?
I am originally from Champaign, Illinois.
Okay.
Well, that's where I call home. I moved a bunch as a kid, but Champaign's where I call home. That's where I went to high school. That's where I sort of became an adult. And from there, I joined the Army and traveled to exotic, uncomfortable places. And after that, I lived in California for about 5 years.
Oh, yeah? We're in California.
I was in the Bay Area.
We're in the Bay Area.
I lived between Oakland and Berkeley most of my time there, but I worked in San Francisco because they pay a little bit better.
Interesting. Okay, I lived in Ukiah in Mendocino County.
Oh, okay, nice.
North of there, so.
It's a pretty area.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Anyway, go on. What were you? You said you were in California for a while.
I moved to Kokomo for a job, and then the job fell through, and I stayed for a girl, and then that also fell through. So now I'm in college as an almost 36-year-old undergrad, and that's why I'm here still.
Cool. Sounds like a Creedence song.
It could be.
But that's cool, man. Yeah, I like Kokomo a lot. As you know, I worked there for almost 6 years, so I'm very familiar with Kokomo, and it's a great city. It's got a lot going for it, so it's a cool place to be.
Yeah, I've been here for almost 7 years now, and it gets a bad rep from a lot of the locals, but most of the people that complain about Kokomo have just never been anywhere else, and
right, exactly.
Logansport
there's much worse places.
Count.
Yeah, there's worse places than Kokomo. Believe me, I've been there.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, there's so many worse places. This is a decent place to raise a family. The cost of living is super low. More businesses are moving in to do more things. So it's always getting better, and it was never as bad as people tried to complain that it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's believe me, I used to administrate the Kokomo Tribune social media profiles for years, and I'm very familiar with the complaints. So don't worry, I've heard them all.
Also, you're allowed to leave. Like, if you don't have kids and you hate it here that much, go. Like, it's not that hard. I moved across the country to manage a comedy club that lasted for 6 months. It's not hard to leave.
Right. Definitely. Well, there's a lot there I want to touch on, but going back to let's see, Champaign. Let's talk about Champaign a little bit, because I've been there. I covered Ebert Fest for 2 years.
Ebert Fest is great.
So that was cool, and I liked the college there. That was a cool place to visit, and it seemed like a cool place it reminded me a lot of Bloomington, which is where I went to college and was born.
Awesome.
So it just reminded me of that, like, small town college Midwest, feel, which I like a lot. But yeah, what was your time like there, and did you have the seed of wanting to be a comedian at that point, or was that later on?
Well, I moved to Champaign when I was 14. I left when I was 19.
Okay.
When I joined the Army. So I enjoyed entertaining. I was captain of the speech team in high school because I was just a really cool guy. And I definitely joked around a lot. I wrote for the school paper, and my articles were not the best as far as journalism goes, but they were more entertaining than most people's. Which, I mean, we got readers because of me, but it was mostly either parodies or just nonsense articles. I wrote one article saying there hadn't been enough fights that year yet, so people needed to step it up.
Wow.
And I, after I got out of the army, I moved back there very, very briefly, and that's where I started doing stand-up.
Okay.
I I started doing stand-up 3 weeks out from, like, I got out of the army in late September, and mid-October I did my first open mic because a guy that I went to high school with told me I should. We'd been to the open mic at Memphis on Main, and I saw the mic. I thought it was really funny. We were walking back to the car, and I told him just a couple of really dark army stories.
Mm.
And I told them in what I viewed as a humorous way, a therapist would say in a coping mechanisms way. And so he told me I should do the open mic. And the next week I got up and I tanked real bad. It was really bad.
Mm.
Because it turns out a room full of non-veterans doesn't laugh at jokes where the punchline is someone dying and me saying, "Oh well, that's what God
Right.
wanted."
No, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. No, that almost reminds me. If you read any Tim O'Brien books at all,
I have not.
he wrote. Oh goodness gracious, embarrassed. I don't remember the stuff off the top of my head. He was a Vietnam veteran, and he wrote very thinly veiled memoirs, but novels about his time. The Things They Carried, I think, is his most
Oh, then
famous.
yeah, I've read that.
Okay,
I did not
but the
remember the
thing,
name, but I've definitely read that
yeah.
book.
Anyway, there was a story in that book where they called it the tree the lemon tree, but it was because a guy named Lemon got blown up and his body was like in the tree, and so they called it. It's like, but
Yeah,
that's the dark, like, black gallows humor that I'm sure arises in situations like that. And
yeah, it
people
really
when you go
does.
home aren't going to
It's
necessarily think that's a funny joke.
no, like, the first joke that I told was just the story of someone dying in a freak accident, and my
Mm,
punchline was, "I'm just saying that means God wanted you dead."
mm,
And
right.
everybody just stared at me uncomfortably, which now that I'm further away from it and have had some therapy, I recognize is the normal response to that kind of story. Uh, but like, I've told that story since then when I've done benefit shows, and the veterans find it hysterical,
No, yeah,
because now I'm
sure,
just better at picking my audience for stories like that.
absolutely. So, well, I guess going back, what made you want to join the army in the first place, I guess?
I joined the army because of September 11th.
Mm,
It September 11th was my junior year in high school, and it just I wanted to make a difference. I was very, very idealistic. I was the poster child for someone who should join the army. I was a smart kid, but I was unmotivated. I was getting in trouble. I was selling drugs. I was scrawny, and then I, rightly or wrongly, wanted to be part of something bigger than myself and wanted to change the world. And obviously, it's not as blindingly altruistic and amazing as that, but that was what I thought as a kid, and it was enough to get me in.
how did that hold up over time?
um, this this still has listeners in Indiana, so I'm not gonna go into my full rant, but I will say that the idealism faded very quickly. I think that there are a lot of things that I did that I am proud of. There's some things that I'm not, but there are people who are alive right now who probably wouldn't be if I hadn't been there. And
Mm,
that's the lens that I choose to look at it through, to not go crazy thinking about the politics of the Iraq War and all of the craziness with contractors and should we or shouldn't we have been there and all that. I'm willing to have those conversations, but from the personal side of it, I just try to focus on I did do some good things over there.
Mm. So what years to what years and how long and where, what were the specifics of it?
So I enlisted in January of 2005.
Okay.
Turned 20 during basic training. Graduated from basic in early May and went off. I was an interrogator in the Army, so I went to interrogation school from there in Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And by December of 2005, I was in Iraq. And I was in Mosul and Baghdad. And then after getting back from Mosul and Baghdad, they sent me down to Monterey, California to learn Arabic because, you should definitely learn the language after you're done being there twice. And I re-enlisted in Monterey because the Defense Language Institute is paradise. Like Monterey, California is where I want to go if I ever grow up. Like it is, it's never colder than 60. It's never hotter than 80. You can go on Fisherman's Wharf and just watch the otters and the seals play in the water. If you like golf, Pebble Beach Golf Course is right there. There's amazing food. It is paradise. And I was in a school environment rather than a traditional Army environment. So I was going to school and living in paradise. So obviously I wanted to keep that going. So I re-enlisted, and then they sent me to El Paso, Texas. And I don't know how much time you've spent in Texas, but it's not as great as Monterey, California. There are 0 otters playing on the border with Juarez.
Right.
And when I was there, that was when some of the injuries that I had sustained in Mosul were made more obvious because I was back doing regular Army stuff instead of just in school. Mm-hmm. And so after a series of doctor's appointments, I was a medical discharge towards the end of 2008. So I was planning on doing 20 years. And instead, I did just under 4. Mm. And that'll put you in a bad place.
That's your whole identity that's gone, right? I mean,
that's a good way of putting it. Like it is when you're in the military, it becomes your entire identity, or you're miserable. Like there's not another way to do it. Once you get out, there's a few ways it can go, but while you're in, it has to be every part of who you are.
Mm-hmm. But so you're in the Army. You're in it. Are you telling jokes while this is happening? Are you thinking of jokes? Are you? Does anyone else know that you want to be funny? Like what's going on?
I was definitely a jokes guy. I watched a lot of stand-up. And I told a lot of jokes. I remember while I was in Mosul, I wrote, rather than sending individual emails and individual letters, because I didn't have that kind of time, I put out what I called a newsletter, and I just sent that to everybody who wanted it. And the first one that I wrote, I was very honest about what was happening, and they did not want that. They thought they wanted that. They did not want to hear the actual details, even though that's what they thought. So I started glossing over a lot of the details. I would give some stuff like, oh man, it's really hot and the food sucks, but I would leave out we got bombed again this week. That makes 4 times and it's Wednesday. And I started adding in jokes to offset the unpleasant stuff because I didn't want my family and my friends worrying about me. I'm not good at being worried about. Mm-hmm. And so I channeled a lot of the old school paper and speech team stuff for that, but I still wasn't getting onto a stage. I liked making people laugh. I liked entertaining people, but I still wasn't on a stage.
So you did not go on a USO tour during your service?
I saw some really great USO stuff, and
Oh yeah?
I was shocked to find out how much I enjoyed Carrot Top.
Nice.
Like prop comedy gets a really bad rep, but Carrot Top puts in the work and is
Uh-huh.
incredibly clever and fun.
Mm.
I also was lucky enough to see Toby Keith. I did not see Joe
Wow.
D. Messina because I didn't really know any of her music at the time. And then I met the Patriots cheerleaders and didn't care because yeah, they were pretty, but it was the Patriots. Um,
So that kind
I,
of killed it for you.
I wouldn't say it killed it because it was nice to see pretty girls that didn't have six
Sure.
months of Middle East dust on them, but it would have been nicer to see a team that I liked.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So you've got these experiences. You have now an outlet, even if maybe people aren't ready to hear the gory details. Um, how do you develop from there? Because it sounds like you might have fell on your not on your face. Maybe it was just the wrong. They weren't ready to hear that, or in that way, or I don't know, whatever, or maybe any number of things. But where does it go from there?
Well, what I know now, looking back at that first time, it was a real cross section because they weren't the right audience, but also I wasn't a good enough comic to tell those kinds of jokes yet.
Hmm.
Uh, because I talk about the army and I don't necessarily go into uh, that much like explicit detail about deaths, but I do talk about the fact that I have PTSD and I'll talk about walking with a limp. So I'm a better comic now, so I'm better able to write and tell the jokes that could make someone a little bit squirmy.
Mm-hmm.
But finding the right audience is also important. And so I went to a lot of shows. I remember when I first moved to the Bay, I went to Annie's Social Club, and unfortunately, it's not there anymore. It was this super gritty, cool punk rock club.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was one of the stops for the Folsom Street Fair. Like it was gritty, and they had a back room that was just plastered with Betty Page postcards. And this room, it was 100%. I was never there when it wasn't for comedy, but it was definitely used as like a mini strip club when it wasn't there for comedy because there were mirrors that I've heard about having as a child of God. I've never been into a strip club, obviously, but they had the mirrors on the back. They had this little stage that had a very suspicious hookup in the middle of it that we had to dodge around that looked like it was for a pole. And the room only held about 20 people, but this Tuesday night mic was incredibly popular. And so my first week in California, I went to this open mic and I went 41st out of 43 comics.
Mm.
And the only people in the room were the two guys going after me, the host and my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it just it was great to start immersing myself in comedy, to get to be around great comics. There was just amazing clubs all over the Bay Area that I got to go to, and once people start to recognize that you're a comic, you don't have to pay as much. Like for the A-lister shows, you're definitely paying, but for local shows and even some of the lower tier headliners, they'll just let you in because they want to fill out the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just got to see amazing comedy and start meeting cool people to do some writing with, and I learned how I wanted to sound as a comic just from being in the culture of it. And it was pretty great looking back on it now. It was there's a lot of BS to the business side of comedy, and I was new enough that I wasn't exposed to any of that yet, so I could really just enjoy the fun of comedy.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned you had PTSD. How does that manifest itself, and how does that affect being on stage?
Well, I've gotten a lot better over the years, but I still have nightmares, still very vivid dreams. I'm still don't have a great startle response. It's pretty aggressive. I think one of the more unpleasant experiences was 2 years ago. I was doing shows and fireworks started as I walked on the stage.
Mm.
And if I know fireworks are coming, then I can sort of brace myself for it. I still would prefer to not be around them. I remember there was a 4th of July several years ago that I was over at Lauren and Marty's house, and I just hung out with their dog. We just sat on the couch. Everybody else was outside looking at the fireworks, and the dog and I just hung out on the couch, and it was much better for me. But
Right.
when I don't know there's going to be fireworks, it is rough. And I gave the set went okay, but it was very on autopilot. I've been doing this long enough that I can kind of just roll with it. But it didn't feel good. It felt very frantic, and so I gave a much slower, more aggressive set than I usually do because I was just kind of trying to work out my own brain during it.
But how are you, I guess, over time? I'm sure you still have things you want to talk about that might be difficult for people to hear, but have you maybe found a different way of communicating those things as time has gone on?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Like I said earlier, I'm a better comic now than I was then.
Uh-huh.
So I'm better at pacing it properly, so I'm not overloading heavy stuff all at once. And I'm better at managing the payoff because the first joke I told is the story of someone dying, and I'm just saying that means God wanted you dead is not enough of a punchline for that kind of a story. So now, if I'm telling a story about just being in Iraq, or like, I remember there's a joke that I tell about waterboarding somebody. It was an ex-girlfriend. She asked for it. It was a very weird experience. But like that is a really uncomfortable story to tell for myself, for the audience, especially women who've been through some shit. That's not a pleasant topic. But I've workshopped the joke enough, I've done enough work, and I've become a good enough comic that the payoff on the end of it is worth it. So it's a combination of knowing how to tell the joke and how to write a good enough punchline that lets me get to less pleasant topics.
Yeah, that makes sense. But okay, so you're in California, you're telling jokes on stage, and then what happens next?
Well, I got to a point where this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make a go of it, but California is, I mean, it's expensive. It's expensive as all get out.
No kidding. No, I mean, where I lived in Ukiah, it used to be the cheap place if you wanted to live near the bay, but not live in the bay. And now it's like it's as much as like the North Bay, and it's like I can't even see the bay from here, and it's like I have to drive an hour to get to Target in Santa Rosa, and it's like
it's awful.
I'm still paying.
Like I was paying $800 a month for a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood, and I was lucky that it cost that little.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I was making almost $50,000 a year, and I was living paycheck to paycheck. And so when you're doing that, it's hard to go on the road, and you're not making money on shows in California. That's not entirely true. In the Bay, you're not making money on shows unless you are an A-lister, because there are so many A-listers that are coming in, and then there's also so many new people that are willing to do it for free, that as a middle act, it is very, very difficult to make any money. So I made plans. I went on Craigslist and found an apartment, and I found a job, and I moved back initially to Champaign, but I was only in Champaign for about a month and a half before I linked up with the comedy club owner in Kokomo,
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed like an amazing opportunity. I'd never heard of Kokomo before except
Mm-hmm.
for the song, and that is obviously not this place.
Mm-mm. Nope. John
But
Stamos lied to us.
and so I moved here with a couple bags of clothes and almost nothing else, and it hasn't all been great, but overall it hasn't been a bad experience. I've met some really great contacts, and Kokomo is a perfect central location for me to be able to travel from. I am less than 4 hours away from five major markets.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can go on the road, I can still interact with amazing comedians, and it's much, much less expensive than California.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know the comedy club you mean downtown. Now, I remember it was like, how long was it open for?
It was open for less than a year. So it was open from the second week of June of 2014
Okay.
until February of 2015.
Hmm.
And Kokomo, it did not shut down in any way because of Kokomo. Kokomo was incredibly supportive.
Uh-huh.
We we definitely had a few dud weekends, but I think during my time there, because I quit in January. I was there
Mm-hmm.
from from June 25th until mid-January. And we had a couple of nights that we had to cancel the show because there weren't enough people. But overall, we had incredibly supportive crowds, even for the not celebrities, because obviously Donnie Baker weekend sold out, Jamie Kennedy weekend sold out, but we had BT come through a couple of times, Chris Bowers came through a couple of times, very, very funny guys, but not A-list headliners, and we
Mm-hmm.
still had great turnout.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely didn't shut down because of Kokomo. It shut down because of the leadership from the very top.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I was interested to see it. The problem with me was
You
I
worked
had
nights,
I
and
worked
you had a
nights
baby.
and I had a bit. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. This is like the two not most conducive things. And I love stand-up comedy. I would have loved to see. And I was like, hey, look, Bill Hicks and George Carlin are on the outside of this building. I want to go in there sometime. And then I was like, hey, wait a second, it's closing now. I didn't get a
Yeah.
chance to go in.
Oh yeah.
um,
It was a flash in the pan that deserved deserved more from its leadership because Kokomo did its part.
hmm
All right, the town definitely did its part to keep that club alive because there's not a lot to do in this town. The one major fault that I find with Kokomo is there is not a lot to do that during the evenings that is not centered around drinking.
Right.
And you're going to drink at the comedy club, but that's not the point. Like you drink at the comedy club as almost like a tax for seeing the
Right.
show. And like there's some people that get just wrecked and those people ruin shows. But like we the sweet spot for a comedy club, if you can handle having five drinks without making an ass of yourself, then the comedy club loves you because they want you to buy those five drinks. But most people, they have those five drinks and then they ruin the show.
hmm
But people would come out. People were ready to have a great time because in Kokomo, especially then, like Kokomo had so many strip clubs when I moved here. Like I think there were seven strip clubs in a town of 50,000 people. And so there was very little to do at night in Kokomo other than go to a strip club or go to a bar and hear a cover band play Here I Go Again by Whitesnake the exact same way as seven other cover bands in town. So the town was super ready for this club and it didn't work out and that
Mm.
is very disappointing.
Would you ever start another comedy club on your own?
I would love to be the entertainment manager of a comedy club. Being the bar manager takes too much away from doing my own stand up. Uh,
Mm.
because when I was as the bar manager, I was also bartending, which meant that I had to be there every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And I can't really go on the road and be successful if the 3 prime days for comedy I have to be behind the bar of my own club.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, for where I was in my comedy career at the time, it was perfect because I
Mm-hmm.
made a lot of great contacts. I was able to do guest sets. Uh, One of the headliners that we had, Chris Shaw, super funny guy, was the first headliner to ever take me on the road with him. And I wouldn't have gotten that contact if I hadn't been the bar manager of this club. So for where I was in my career, it was the right moment in time. But now I couldn't do that again. I would happily uh, be the guy who books the comedians and makes sure that the contracts are honored and the writers are honored, but I would never want to have to be there all the time again.
Right. Um, okay, but so you're doing, more comedy, more places. I assume you're getting in front of bigger audiences now,
Oh yeah,
than you have
usually,
been before.
hopefully.
Oh, well, yeah, that's hopefully. Um, and then pandemic time. So,
Yeah.
how's that going?
Oh, it's super. Never been happier.
Right. I'm loving it personally.
So I got very lucky in my non-comedy career because I had decided to go back to school
Mm,
right as rumors of COVID were starting.
okay.
Um, like we were hearing about stuff in China, and there were fears, and then there was the cruise ship, but there were no cases in America, even though there were absolutely cases in America. We just didn't know it
Hmm.
yet. And I decided that I wanted to stop working jobs that even if I liked the job I wasn't passionate about. And so I signed up to go back to school. I found out about a program for disabled veterans that was going to take care of me. And so I signed up. I found out all the transfer credits I had from when I failed at college before. And I planned to start in the summer of 2020. And then the world shut down.
Hmm.
And it verified that my decision to go back to school was right, but it also, I lost a lot of work. There was a club that I was supposed to feature at March 13th and 14th.
Ouch.
And obviously that didn't happen. And then
Mm-mm.
the Drop Comedy Club in South Bend is the first place I ever headlined. I recorded my album there, and I was supposed to be there again in November. And then Laughs Comedy Cafe in Tucson was going to have me come out for essentially an audition weekend for feature work. Laughs Comedy Cafe in Tucson. I did a lot of open mics there back in the day. I've got a bunch of friends in Tucson still. So I was happy to go out there and just host for a weekend and work towards paid feature work there. And then countless other one-nighters that fell through.
Mm.
And then Zoom started happening.
Hmm.
Um, just a couple of comics started doing some shows on Zoom, and then the Drop Comedy Club started running an open mic on Zoom. And then Facebook groups started to crop up with people from all over the world, like just trying to put shows together. And it's not the same, but it is frequently better than it has any right to be. I did my album release show. I did over Zoom, and I got to have comics who I loved from when I lived in California on the same lineup as comics from Chicago, and I was hosting, and I had my buddy Che Guerrero out of Philadelphia got to be on the show. So just lineups have sprung up that could never have been done without Zoom stepping up to do
Mm.
this. And it, like I said, it's not the same because you're not getting as many people in a small contained space all together laughing and feeling that energy. But you can still put together some great shows, and as long as you help the audience understand what's expected of them, they will leave their microphones on and they'll laugh. I'm doing a show on the 24th, a virtual show, and I'm going to be streaming it on my Facebook comedy page, but I'm putting about 20 audience members in the Zoom room also, so we've got laughter happening. And it the world changed, but that doesn't mean it's bad. You just have to figure out how to evolve with it.
But okay, so do you always leave the mics on for people to laugh?
So what I do, I'm very careful about who I let in the room with their mics on. Like if someone has small kids, then I don't let them in the Zoom room for that show. I direct them to the Facebook page where they can watch it over live. So if the kids come running in and screaming, they can still watch the show. No one's saying we don't want people with kids, but if there's the chance of crazy surprise noise, we should put somebody else in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't make people turn their cameras on because people get a little bit shy about that, but I direct the people who are specifically going to be in the room to have their microphones on to make sure that there's still some of that instant gratification, immediate response that comedians crave, and so we know that our jokes are working.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the difference between old sitcoms and
Yeah.
now. It's like, unless it's like intentionally trying to be that way, it's not like that's expected. You know what I mean? But I feel like before they're like, but how will people know when it's funny to laugh? They have to hear other people laughing, otherwise they'll be like, I don't know what to do. Like,
Yeah, like that was definitely an obstacle early on, but now we're a year in,
sure.
and if there are still people that I see in these Facebook comedy groups raging about how Zoom shows are terrible and it's not
Mm.
the same, and like I said, it's not identical, but it's similar enough in good ways and bad. I did a show on February 13th, and there was a guy who just told an uncomfortably long erotic poem, and you don't get that except at a comedy open mic, and that could have easily been live because he wasn't getting a response even live. And so it's not always a good thing, but often enough it is a good thing. I got Sammy Obeid, who is one of the funniest humans I have ever met. Um, I'm lucky enough to call him a friend, but he's just a brilliantly funny comic. He has the Netflix show 100 Humans. He's got the world record for most consecutive nights doing stand up.
Mm.
And I haven't seen him in person in 7 years, but I've gotten to do shows with him now.
Mm.
So even if it's not the same, it can still be really good. And people who are not picking up on that, they're going to come in once the world fully reopens. They're going to come into this with a year or more of dust to knock off. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
comics like me, like Sammy, like lots of comics who have done the drop, or any of these other, like Joe Gorman from New York runs a 2 times a week Zoom open mic, and people that are doing that will not have nearly that kind of dust. There will be some awkwardness being on stage again and realizing that you can't turn your mic off when you want to pick your nose, but like there will still be much less of a painful return to form for the people who've been working at it. And so while technology isn't a perfect solution, it's been a really good addition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can't mute Heckler in real life, so that's kind of fun. So,
That's very true.
but yeah, frankly, I haven't actually attended one of these Zoom shows. I've been a little hesitant, to be honest. I am such a fan of stand-up comedy as a format. It's just, yeah, like you said, it's different, and I'm sure it's fine because you still get to work out material, and you get to see what works and what doesn't. And I'm sure that when things do start opening up, hopefully in a few months here or a year or whatever, that like you said, you're going to hit the ground running, and you won't be out of shape. You
Oh
know.
yeah, I've written several jokes during this, and some are good and some are not, but that's normal. Like
Hmm.
there have been jokes that I've done on a couple of Zoom mics that I recognize just from the way I phrased them are not where they need to be for me to be telling them on shows for money. But there have been some that I've been able to workshop, and I really like where they've gotten. So comics should still be working, even if there's not the same kind of money. The art form hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm. But so how do you think this is going to happen in the future, though? Because now that we've opened up all these avenues that we didn't have before, how is that going to happen when we can go into these places, but will people necessarily want to, or I don't know. So I bet some people are just going to do Zoom shows, even when they can do normal open, you know what I mean, out in the world again, and like a lot of the thing about like movie distribution, I think it's changing now, but how much of that is permanent? You know what I mean? Once they figure out they can just beam it into your house, are they really gonna try to get it into every theater? It'll probably just be like the same 5 superhero movies then, not like it isn't already, but
Yeah.
um,
With
you know what I mean? Like
movies,
yeah.
with movies, I think they're definitely going to like. I think that independent theaters are screwed, but the big theaters will still show the movies because the distribution companies, unless HBO is spending $1 billion, Marvel is still going to
Mhm.
try to put the movie into theaters because like these movies are $1 billion films, and HBO Max is not spending $1 billion to get
No,
Avengers 5.
no.
Uh, with comedy, there are some people who are definitely going uh, to keep doing it this way. Some places are going to do both. I know that the Drop is they're moving their digital open mic over to Mondays so they can have their in-person open mic on Tuesdays. The Drop is reopening this weekend with limited seating. So places are trying, as cases start to drop and the vaccine rollout happens, they're trying to reopen.
Mm.
Uh, and so I think some places will go strictly digital still, but I think that a lot of places will try to do both. If they can spend the money on the multimedia, they might even have a Zoom room for their live shows so
Mm.
that they can stream it for the people that don't want to or can't be there. As because a professional Zoom subscription costs what, like $20?
Mm-hmm.
So if they can for $20 generate even 10 more tickets sold a month, like they've paid for that.
Right.
So it wouldn't surprise me if some of the bigger venues like the Punchline in San Francisco or the Comedy Store, the Improv, start doing that um, as just an added way to get people in the seats who can't or aren't willing to go there yet.
Mm-hmm.
With school, this was something that I think is the first time it's ever happened, but I convinced a group of people that we didn't need to have meetings anymore. We could just do this by email.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this
It
meeting
was
could have been an
amazing.
email.
It was
The title of my
amazing.
autobiography for years.
Right? And like it's also been interesting because to just I'm going to make a blanket statement here and we'll caveat it up front with obviously I know that I'm making a blanket statement and not all people blah blah blah. But it's been kind of nice to be able to when I do have to go out know who the assholes are because they're the ones not wearing a mask at the grocery store.
Mm.
Like it's nice to know just on site who I don't want to talk to without it being a
Hmm.
problematic statement. Like
Yeah.
to see the guy in the hat that we all know which hat and no mask to on site know this guy probably doesn't have anything to say that I want to hear, and when he does say it, he's going to be standing way too close to me. It's nice to be able to avoid people on site and not have that be a problematic thing to say.
I'm never gonna shake another person's hand in my life. I'm so done with that. I was done with
Oh,
that. I was done with that before, but now I'm like, yes, we're finally we've killed it. We've slayed the beast.
if I don't know someone well enough to hug them, they are getting a fist
Stop
bump or a wave.
stop touching me. Like just stop.
Right?
I need the 6 feet before this. I'm gonna need at least 10 going forward.
Oh, absolutely. You get a megaphone to talk to any strangers that you need to see.
Exactly. Oh, for sure. Yeah, but well, I
That
mean,
actually will change things for comedy though a lot
mm,
because a lot of us make more money on merch sales than we
mm,
make on the show itself. So figuring out a safe way for me to sell my album after a show and to sell my shirts after a show is the one major change that I have to figure out how to make.
mm. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. That kind of reminds me of the music business in a lot of ways. That's a lot of
100%.
that's a lot of the revenue at this point. Obviously, the music has been, that's been taken away except for vinyl, I guess. And streaming to a certain degree, but I don't know how much that really gives anybody, but I think it's that physical thing. Like, for example, like I just got into the band Arctic Monkeys, like
Oh,
the
they're
last couple
great.
of weeks. Holy crap. I don't know how I missed it. I lived in England in 2005 when I was student teaching. I don't know how this happened to me. I say it somehow completely passed me by. But I'm just like diving headfirst into that. But I mean, maybe I'll buy some vinyl eventually, but like I'm not gonna probably buy any of their albums for a while. I will, however, probably when I get my taxes back, buy a T-shirt. You know what I mean?
Right?
I'll buy an Arctic Monkey T-shirt, but like I'm probably not gonna. I have Spotify and Apple or Amazon Music, and I have ways to listen to their music right now that are fine. But like I want to like support the band or whatever, but like I don't need a CD right now. My car has a CD player. I think it works. I actually couldn't say if it works honestly. I listen to things constantly, but I couldn't say if my CD player works. You know what I mean? And I used to listen to countless CDs. I had 5 books of CDs I'd drive to school with. I would be like
Oh,
20
the
minutes to get
book.
out the driveway to pick up the right burned CD. You know what I mean? Like,
I do. I do. I found out that my CD player in my car does not work.
oh boy,
I found that
you have an
out.
aux cable at least.
I don't. What I do
Ah,
is I've got a Bluetooth speaker that I just
okay.
keep in my
That
car.
works. Yeah.
Uh, I found out that the CD player doesn't work when
Mm,
I went to Half Price Books in Indianapolis and I bought 2 CDs and I was so excited. I got in the car. I was I was amped. I bought uh Prince's, or he was the artist at the time, the album that had Rave into the Joy Fantastic on it,
mm,
and I
nice.
bought Miley Cyrus's album Bangers, and I
Mm,
was so excited and then just heartbroken that I couldn't get my,
right.
my CD player to work.
Mm,
I
yeah.
mean, then I just listened to the albums on Apple Music on my phone the way I had
Right.
been doing anyway, but it was still. I would have been more mad if I'd paid full price for them, but I think I paid
Hmm.
$8 for both. But it was still very disappointing.
Right. 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 No, but I've been listening to more vinyl and stuff. But yeah, no, in the car it's usually aux cable or Bluetooth, honestly. But um, well, that's great, man. Thanks for taking so much. I've taken almost an hour of your time here. I appreciate you spending so much of your evening with me.
Yeah, definitely. It
But
was fun.
yeah. So that leads into my final question that I always ask. What music have you been listening to lately?
Well, I am a just devoted Miley Cyrus fan, specifically Hannah Montana
Hmm.
era.
Interesting.
I enjoy everything Miley's done, but Hannah Montana era Miley, because I
Huh.
try to listen to a lot of just hyper upbeat pop music because the world's on fire and the army pounded into us that you fake it till you make it. So I figure if I just listen to a bunch of just crazy upbeat pop music, like your S Club 7, early Britney, that kind of stuff,
Oh, did you
I
see
can
that Britney
hopefully.
documentary thing,
Oh
the
my God,
New
that
York
was
Times
heartbreaking.
thing?
That
That was
was
crazy, man.
heartbreaking. I just
Man.
I do the same thing with movies where I primarily will watch comedies unless there's something specific that I'm looking for, just because there's enough unpleasantness organically in the world that I
Mm,
want to try to change my own mindset away from looking at the negative. And it does not always work, but I can't imagine how negatively my mindset would be if I was always listening to like Amon Amarth and hyper aggressive other music and watching war documentaries.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's very therapeutic, but well, that's cool. But how did you feel about was the Bangers era of Miley, was that the hip hop era, or was that the
Yes, that
okay,
album,
interesting.
actually, that
Was that the
album does have
23 with Mike Will and Juicy J? Am I thinking of that?
that song's not on the album, but
Oh,
that
it's
is
the
that
single.
era.
Okay, gotcha.
Uh, that album has a song with Nelly that is way better than it deserves to be.
Hmm.
Like I saw his name on there and thought it was just going to be ridiculous, and it's a great song. It's also got a song with Britney on there. Like the whole album's fun, and that's later than Hannah, but it's a very fun album, very upbeat.
Hmm. Well, that's cool. How do you feel about the older Cyrus?
I think she's incredibly talented. I really, really enjoyed
Wait, she?
the.
I was talking
Oh,
about
I'm
Billy
sorry, you mean
Ray.
Billy
I,
Ray.
I don't
Sorry,
know
I
how
thought you
old
meant
she
like
is. Does she have an older sister?
I thought you meant like as she's gotten older. I apologize. Billy
Oh,
Ray.
you were still talking about Miley's career. No, no,
Billy
I was
Ray
talking about Billy
is.
Ray.
I unironically enjoy Achy Breaky Heart, but my favorite thing that Billy Ray has ever done, at least once every 6 months, I will just need to remind myself that sometimes all it takes is one moment, one just lucky, lucky moment to make a hit. And there is a rapper called Buck 22
Hmm.
who did a song called Achy Breaky 2, where he sampled Achy Breaky Heart. And that song is the worst song I've ever heard. It is so bad. And Buck 22 made a bunch of money off of it. Billy Ray Cyrus was in the video. And one of the lines is, I'd rather be lucky than good. And like, yeah, you nailed it. You nailed
Hmm.
it. So at least once every 6 months, I will listen to that song, and I will also watch Airbud 2 Golden Receiver to just remind myself that it doesn't take much. It just takes one just lucky moment to make your career.
Oh, absolutely. And it has nothing to do with quality
Well, of
in
course
any
not.
way.
Of course not. You can just be the right moment in time and get
Absolutely.
completely
Oh,
famous.
for sure.
The right moment in time, and you can be Jeff Dunham. Like, doesn't matter.
Wait a minute, you got to work for years to be Jeff Dunham.
Do you though?
That's
Do
opportunity
you?
meets preparation, right there. Uh, that's hilarious. But well, hey, thanks for coming on, and yeah, I'll be looking out for what you're doing. Maybe I'll come see you in person once we're on the after times of the world
That
after
would
we're
be fantastic, man.
vaccinated or whatever. But yeah, thanks so much, and have a great rest of your night.
You do the same. It was a lot of fun.
Great. Bye bye. Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, RSS, and now Spotify. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. If you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Also, if you want to call or text the show for any reason, the number is 317-674-3547. Until next time.